Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining me for our discussion around the dawn of the new publisher. We're entering an era where first-party data accrued by the publishers has put them in a fairly unfamiliar position of strength, I'd say. And it's really good to be on stage with three representatives from publishers to investigate how this has happened and what the future looks like. First of all, if my panelists would please introduce themselves.
Should I start? Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Joshua Campanella. I am the Client and Programmatic Director at South China Morning Post.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm the SVP of Regional Partnerships at Hello Health Group. You may not know us by our parent name, but you may know us by our platform. We have 10 health platforms across the region, and we're the leading health and wellness network in Asia.
Hi everyone, my name is Hao Tran. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Vietcetera Media. It's a publisher based in Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh City. We are, by most measures, the leading publisher for Gen Z, millennials, and also Henry's, high earners not rich yet in Vietnam. We have an audience of about 5 million per month. We have a website. We're also the leading podcast studio in Vietnam. And we also publish IP on videos and all that. But yeah, check it out, Vietcetera.
Thank you all very much for joining me. So, as I mentioned, publishers are in a very different position than they were even 5 years ago, and I would just like to start off by getting your opinions on why. Joshua, you are from South China Morning Post, a legacy publisher with a long history. How have you seen things change over the last few years?
Well, I think everything has really changed over the last 5 years, and I think a lot of that has been accelerated by the pandemic, absolutely. And I'm not even just talking about from a publisher standpoint, digital transformation, e-commerce, especially with small business and things like that, and then the deprecation of cookies. It's really accelerated to be more focused and data-centric. Now, 5 years ago, publishers relied more on agencies and brands, and we were really at the mercy of those groups. And I remember even when I first started in digital, we would still be buying print or radio first, and then you would get some digital impressions for free. And even back then, everybody's like, oh, I don't want that. That's gross. But programmatic has really, it was initially embraced by publishers as a way to monetize their assets. But as time has changed and everybody has moved online, everything is digital first. So therefore, that has become very, very important for us. And a lot more publishers are starting to get a strong foothold and ownership of data. And data is really the fuel that's helping power publishers' revenues and growth in the oncoming years. And with the impending phase, whenever that decides to happen for cookies, that will help drive that even more.
Ian, so you are from a much younger business than South China Morning Post. You are a data native, I suppose.
Yeah.
In the short time, I think 2016, Hello Health was launched. In your lifetime, how have you seen? How has your business adapted?
So we are a digital ecosystem launched in 2016, and really, on the outset, we knew that the value of data, but we also knew that health was underserved in terms of local languages in markets, and that there was a role for a publisher or content platforms, but also partner in helping serve that gap. We also knew that health is a humanistic journey, which means that on the outset, understanding how you create or how you build your experiences in platform should be reflective of that humanistic journey. Taxonomy, category trees, we did a lot of mind mapping around health topics, how people would navigate in order to categorize well. It starts with that in order to get the richness of your data on your back end. So pretty much on the outset, last 4 years, we've been actually sharpening our data capabilities, understanding users, understanding segments, where they are on a patient journey, because not do they just come in for diabetes content, but are they trying to discover this condition? Are they already suffering and diagnosed? Or are they just wanting life management tips because they are having to live with the therapy? Now, each of that part we can contextualise based on our triggers, our content structure, our enriched data sets. And that actually is now more valued today than it was even 4 years ago, because brands and agencies understand the value of custom audience segments and understanding that journey, the need to be relevant and precision marketing. So it's our moment.
I think it's a similar case for you, how you are Vietcetera, who formed 2015, I believe, and so a similar age to Hello Health. How have you seen the industry change in that time?
Yeah, I love what Ian said about humanizing and getting closer to the audience. It's not just about the data and impressions now. In our business, Vietcetera, this is obviously a global audience here. The best way to compare us is kind of like a Morning Brew or Vice of Vietnam. That's not exactly the comparison, but just to give you a snapshot. And if you look at those platforms, it's all about speaking to that young audience and then monetizing it through the data. And I'll give you an example through Vietcetera. And again, we're mostly Vietnamese. We do have an English site, so you guys can check it out. Much smaller. It's only 1% of our audience. But on the Vietnamese site, we realized young people in Vietnam today, they want access to information about personal finance, about health, mental especially, in our case, on Vietcetera, even relationships, identity, sexual health, education. And I'll give you guys a snapshot of how we've used data to inform our storytelling. We have a series on Vietcetera called Gởi Mở, which in Vietnamese means take it off. It's a sexual health, education, relationship identity program. And we knew that this was a hot topic. It's trending on social media. People are talking about it online and offline. But publishers weren't, because it's taboo. People were scared in a legacy market like Vietnam, where it's a communist country that also lends to it. But social values, family values are very important. But young people, it's all over TikTok, it's all over Facebook. They're talking about it, but publishers weren't. So we decided to go for it. And what better than to use our first-party data, or platform, or website to test that? So we ended up writing articles about these topics, and within minutes of it releasing, we would have these, every Friday we have a new column on this, check it out. It's kind of like Modern Love on the New York Times. That's another good comparison. And we would see that the readers would just go nuts for it immediately when it's released. There was a voice that could represent them, not just their friends on social media and influencers, but this platform. And the data was so raw and rich that we decided to package it, built if sold. I think you guys are familiar with that term if you're a publisher. And we went to one of our advertisers, Durex, owned by Reckitt, the condom maker, and we told them, guys, you need content, but look at this data behind it. It's just telling us that we need to go in this direction. And they loved it. These brands, they want stories, they want content, but the hard sell, right, the 10% of that sell, also you need the data. And they went for it. So we sold them a podcast show under the same name. So we've got this ecosystem, articles, which is the foundation. It's much more cost efficient, right? It's easier to put out. You can get data really quickly. We scaled it up to podcasts, and it's now in its 3rd season. And they've actually increased it to also include an offline program, this workshop series where we tour universities throughout Vietnam. This was a great kind of lesson for us in terms of leveraging data, building experiences for young people. But it all started with the data. We make hypotheses based on gut, like, oh, okay, we know young people want to know about investing. You look at the trends, right, like Robinhood and all this. They want to know more about making money, saving money, or in this case, relationships, identity. But in a market like Vietnam, there wasn't enough content serving them. So use a platform that's efficient, cheap, get signals, our website in this case, and then eventually we can build an ecosystem of IP around it. That's what's been able to drive our business in this age. And you're right, we're digital only. We've never done print. We're entirely data driven, at least at the back end. So.
I think you touched on a few interesting points there. I want to pick up on the audience, and you talked about packaging it and how you can use the data. I'm keen to discover a bit more about how your audience cohorts are helping, how your audience is helping you now compete with walled gardens. We talked about the deprecation, which is obviously this has opened the door for publishers. And I'd really like to know the value of your audiences and yeah, how your segmentations are really helping you battle back against the walled gardens. Joshua, how are you have a fairly wide audience for SCMP. How are you realizing that value?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, as a news publisher, we're actually fortunate to have many people that come to our site regularly and read, a diverse range of topics. We have about 31 million monthly active users. And it's very interesting because even though we're a Hong Kong-based newspaper, the US is our biggest market, and followed by Hong Kong and Singapore. Now, this allows us to build an audience with more deep and rich understanding because we build our IDs either based off first-party cookies or declared IDs that are persistent. And we can keep building that data and connect with advertisers with them over a long period of time. Definitely much more than you would on the open web.
Ian, you come from a more specialized area, and so obviously a lot of rich data in health for Hello Health. How is that helping you reach audiences?
I mean, being a specialist in a vertical and to have 36 million unique users coming in per month gives you a very rich context of where they're at or what their health concerns. Of course, we can serve that by health segments, but we also have to remember that health conditions are also triggers or markers of life stage. So you can actually look at our data segments also. How valuable could it be for an indication of life stage? An example of that is similar to what Hao talked about, sexual wellness, one of our top 5 topics. Obviously, we do it in local language and we talk around sexual health and well-being and something that people seek in their personal time. But it's also an indication of an audience that's primarily 18 to 24, entering a sexually active time frame. And then if you think about it that way, they're also consumers of other categories. So that is also very valuable for brands to understand, are these also first jobbers that are also having some spending power? On the flip side, you look at also, there's obviously the chronic conditions that we already specialise in. If you wanted to talk to somebody that was at risk of stroke, we have that audience. That level of granularity we have, but then also again, life stage, thinking about the or individuals that are entering, maybe considering family. So things like conception, trying to get pregnant or even pregnant, they're massive triggers of life stage changes. And that means that could be as valuable to car owners because they have to upsize the car. Insurance brands because they have to sell family kind of insurance. Or even something as, hospital groups. But of course, infant nutrition. Now, our broad data sets can be served across and can be, cross-match depending on different brand needs, and our ability to mine that consistently across 9 countries is also the magical thing when working with us, because we are the only regional health and wellness platform. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, your specialism gives you, a great deal of sway over those nine territories. How, from your point of view, and for a company that has 25 million monthly users, 5 million monthly users, apologies. How are you finding brands coming to you as your reputation grows?
Yeah, in the Vietnam market, again, it's very much legacy. And getting a media license is actually near to impossible because of the government there. But we have one, luckily. It took us 3 years to get it. So given the landscape, we have all these very top-heavy legacy publishers. They're making a lot of money because they're also the barrier of entry is very high. For us, we decided to, we didn't want to do news because there is the New York Times of Vietnam already. We're not going to be able to compete with them. But where are the gaps in the market? And for us, we saw that speaking to what's relevant to young people is the answer. And I'll give you guys, paint a picture. Because whenever I go to pitches with clients, sometimes my team will be like, oh, we are the Gen Z, we are the millennials, 18 to 24-year-old. That's not specific enough. I think that's too broad. You're putting yourself in the same category as a platform, like a TikTok. You have to get granular. And sometimes I like to use the word Henrys. I mentioned this again. How many of you guys are familiar with that term, by the way? Like a decent number, it sounds like. Yeah, so high earners, not rich yet. So the picture I paint for the clients is I get them to ask the question, so I'll send it to you guys again. In Vietnam, there's 1.1 million students who took the national high school exit exam in June. 1.1 million. This is a country of a population of 95 million. That is a highest proportion of almost every single country in the world. I think like Nigeria and the Philippines are around the same category. Of those 1.1 million, 95% of them took the English language proficiency exam. So not only the most, but they also scored the highest out of any other generation before them. And all these 18-year-olds have to open a bank account for the first time. They have to buy a two-wheeler for the first time, a phone, and a laptop. So put yourself in the shoes of the CEO of Vespa or Samsung or Oppo. You're the country manager of Oppo in Vietnam. Those are incredible numbers. Now, how do you speak to that group, right? It's not just the age, or maybe they're high earners, but the high earners not rich yet is actually that's how we really segment our audience. So my takeaway for you guys is, if you're a publisher, let's say, or a brand, how do you really define your audience? I think saying you're 18 or 20-year-old is not enough. You have to get even more granular, and for us, and more specific. For us, it's the high earners or the potential high earners, and that's really what drives the excitement behind Vietnam, and that's what get clients to buy with us, I think.
Just on that, I mean, I think it just shows a testament to how publishers that have a really good ongoing relationship with their consumers, you can really benefit something out of value as opposed to just some broad attachment to it. And I think it's a little bit of a challenge actually at this moment still, because we're kind of still sort of in this post-cookie world. I mean, I don't know if we're in that, but because there's so many things happening at the moment is what I mean. But I think there needs to be more conversation with advertisers to actually really define and understand and have these ongoing conversations and this ongoing dialogue, because there's so much more that can be offered from advertisers with this, or publishers with this deep ongoing relationship beyond just third-party cookies, which I think we're still very much in.
I think Hian, you and I have discussed the loyalty and trust of your audience, and I think that's been important to you.
Yeah, on the outset, being a health publisher, you need to also build trust in the content. And of course, all of our content is written in country, locally medically verified, and proofread by doctors and HCPs on our panel. So that is always paramount. But then actually when you're trying to get them to exchange information, personal data, you need to have a value exchange whereby they trust that value exchange and they see value. It is got to be valuable. So there is a lot of ways in which we try to deepen our insight with our audiences, through first-party data as well, but then also getting an aggregated view of their health concerns. We have health tools, we have screeners, we have assessments, things that they interact with on the platform that on the back end, our CDP is also profiling, able to start profiling audiences. Increasingly, health is also, you have different champions of health in your family. And by understanding the different champions and how they are engaging on topics, you can also understand household. So especially in Asia, where we obviously operate within, understanding things like the carer strategy. Somebody that may be pregnant, she's obviously is interested in pregnancy, but she's also searching on aging bones or osteoporosis. And that could be for somebody else, another family member in the family. So understanding that kind of purchasing influence, and we actually did this campaign for a self-test diagnostics brand, and we just did the campaign review this week, and we ran it across 2 countries, Vietnam and Thailand. We showed them, because they work directly with us as well, we were able to show them our data insight story, and we were able to map out that Thailand, you need to have a stronger carer strategy versus Vietnam. The decision making on that particular device is happening from that carer, female, 34 to 55, and in certain areas. So we were able to really quite get granular around giving them the insights. The other thing that protects us in terms of the walled gardens is health. Health is very regulated. So we also make sure that, we're also meeting the privacy and data governance. And advertisers can't buy this level of audience segment from the walled gardens. It's not possible. So that gives us an advantage as well, that we continue to build out.
Yeah, I think that's one of the major things, one of the reasons that publishers are heading towards this new era is the new consciousness of privacy. How have you seen that kind of the privacy of data and the strength of first-party data grow?
In Vietnam, it's not important at all, actually. People will sell phone numbers by the tens of thousands, email addresses. It's pretty incredible. There's no privacy rules in Vietnam. It's becoming more important. Like the government's starting to work with the platforms to even store user data in Vietnam now. That's beginning to be a requirement. Us as well. Consumers are starting to demand it too. Before, it was quite accepted for this to happen, but I think that's quickly changing. Another note too about walled gardens, there's very few of them in Vietnam. If we're talking like, subscriptions, for example, it's a very unexplored market. People aren't used to paying for content, giving their information to access content. That's not a thing. We are actually going to experiment with that ourselves. I mentioned earlier we're a bilingual publication of our anywhere between 5 to 10 million monthly actives a month on our platforms. About 1% of that is on our English edition. So people like you guys in the room, it's mostly the best. I mentioned Vice and Morning Brew. For our English edition, it's kind of like The Economist for Vietnam. We're nowhere near the standard of The Economist. I'm not saying that we are, but it's one of the few, if only, English. It's one of like 2, I guess you could say, in Vietnam that publish regularly like insights and news about Vietnam. We're gonna start walling with that, but it's because of user behavior, right? Like some of our readers are like the CEO of Nestle in Vietnam. He's Indian. Well, he doesn't read Vietnamese, right? So the behavior there to provide that information to access is there, but Vietnamese not quite yet. Southeast Asia, I would say too. Singapore is like probably the only market that's quite accustomed to that. It's going to be quite interesting to see that unfold pretty soon.
Yeah, you touched on there, things that you are looking to do, places you're looking to go in the future, and I think that brings me on to our final point, really, which is how you as publishers take advantage of this, how you enter this new age, how you make the most of it. Joshua, is it a case of diversification? Is it new products? How are you heading into this new age?
That's like a loaded question. I think there's a few things. Where do I begin? Okay, so I think for a long time, digital advertising has actually not been nice to publishers. And at this moment, in this time that we are right now, there's a tinderbox moment happening. And it's happening from an external point of view, and it's happening from an internal point of view. And from an internal point of view, from an industry perspective, you've got regulation, global privacy issues, the deprecation of third-party cookies, header bidding, and the flattening of the waterfall, and all these things kind of happening at once. And then obviously you have this growth on becoming more data focused and so forth. And then from an external point of view, I think you have a lot of things happening that is driving the need for publishers. And I think a lot of that has actually a result of, active measures, which is misinformation, in this post-Trump, post-COVID era, that people are really out and looking for these sources, these proper sources. Now, I remember in the early 2010s, and I'm sure there's a few people in this room, put your hand up if you were one of those people. I sure as hell was not, but people used to shout just loud about how they used to get their news from Facebook and BuzzFeed. But that is no longer the case. So it's really given us an opportunity to kind of expand on that. Now, what you're seeing with a lot of news organizations is there's a lot of diversification in terms of products and services they offer. So, podcasts, social is massive, blogs, analysis, content is huge as well. And we do all that at SCMP. And then furthermore, we even have the inclusion of polls to really kind of understand our users a little bit more. And this is really, that has become very critical to help build that audience and build that diversification and build these revenue streams. And then on top of that, and it's a double-edged sword because there also needs to be the increase in subscriptions. And the increase in subscriptions helps us build deeper relationships for powering the advertising behind it. So I think all of those things are happening. I think that's what's happening with a lot of these publishers at the moment. And I think it's actually really the time for the evolution of what was once print, because everybody always thought it was going to die. Same with radio when TV came around and so forth. I think this is I think this is the comeuppance for publishers.
Interesting. Ian, how do you see this progression shaking out?
For us, because we were born 6 years ago or 5 years ago, our experience was all data-driven in the first place. So we are leaders in SEO for health and wellness across most of our markets. So we're really at we support patient and consumer journeys. So on the outset, we saw ourselves being more than a publisher. Of course, we had our content platform, but being the start of a journey means that you're building out an ecosystem of value-adding experiences that you can bring by identifying where people are at in terms of their health needs and making sure you had the right services, experiences, and that could be something that we built, but also increasingly looking at partnerships around bringing them onto the platform, because at the end of the day, it's all around making sure it's seen as value-adding for our users and members. And in that also means that we extend the relationship with our users, and the services gives us extended partnerships, gives us monetization opportunities. But increasingly, because of the richness of our SEO traffic, we have first-party cookies extensively. We are able to extend advertisers' campaigns on and off platform. And that's the power of retargeting and remarketing with rich data. And that is where we also see that we are also adding to the value chain on the outset from being a data-centric business from the start. Yeah.
We are nearly out of time, but just to finish, what are your thoughts on how the next few years are going to look for you?
Yeah, again, I'm speaking from a Vietnam-centric point of view and perhaps broader Southeast Asia. But for us, we want to be driven by IP, intellectual property. Like, what are we known for? What is our voice? And why do these brands and readers want to associate with us? More than just the views and the engagement and the likes and all the article views and stuff like that. I kind of relate it to like a building. Like, we're in this hotel. It's only as valuable as the location, the people in it, if the tenants continue to pay for it, if the people continue to pay for the hotel rooms, if they stop, you're no longer value, even if you have the best building in the first place. For us, we want to continue to invest in IP that's more defensible than just the views and the engagement, I feel like. Because at the end of the day, at least for what we do, 90% of the sell is to the hearts and minds, and then 10% is the data, right? And if we can continue to win the hearts and minds of our brands and our readers, the data will kind of follow. And I think that comes with building very strong IP that can come through trust, like Hello Health, or in our case, building programs, shows, and columns that are just continue to be the leaders in the space that they're trying to occupy. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much, all of you, for your time today. It's been really great to get your insights, and I'm sure we'll see over the next year or so whether Google's deprecation does happen and whether publishers can really capitalize on their first-party data. But no, thank you all very much for listening.